used to work security at Hillcrest Cemetery on the edge of town. It was a small job, mostly just driving the perimeter road twice a night and checking the gates. The pay was decent and the work was easy. I told myself the silence didn't bother me. It was late November when I started noticing the car. Always the same one, a dark sedan parked just outside the north gate around 2 in the morning. I'd see it sitting there with the headlights off, engine running. I figured it was someone grieving, maybe too anxious to come inside during the day. I never approached it. That wasn't part of my job. The first time I saw someone standing by the graves, I almost didn't stop. It was a Tuesday, freezing cold, no moon. My headlights caught a figure about 50 yards in, standing completely still between 2 headstones. I slowed down. The person didn't move, didn't turn around, just stood there facing away from me. I waited maybe 30 seconds, then kept driving. When I circled back 10 minutes later, they were gone. I started seeing them more often after that, always in different sections of the cemetery, always standing the same way, perfectly still, like they were waiting for something. I never saw their face. One night, I got out of my truck and called out, asked if they needed help. The figure didn't respond, didn't even acknowledge me. I got back in my truck and left. Then I found the photos. They were tucked under my windshield wiper one night when I came back from my rounds. 4 Polaroids, all taken in the cemetery. The first one showed my truck parked by the maintenance shed. The second showed me walking between 2 rows of graves. The third was taken from behind me while I was locking the south gate. The fourth was a close-up of my face through the driver's side window. I was looking down at my phone. I hadn't noticed anyone nearby that night. I stopped getting out of the truck after that. I'd drive my route, check the gates from inside, and leave as soon as my shift ended. But the photos kept coming. Always Polaroids. Always showing me during my rounds, from angles that didn't make sense. One showed me from above, like someone had climbed a tree. Another was taken from inside the mausoleum, looking out through the iron gate at me walking past. I reported it to my supervisor. He told me to call the police if it happened again. He didn't seem concerned. Said it was probably some bored kids messing with me. But kids don't stand motionless in a freezing graveyard at 2 in the morning. Kids don't follow you without making a sound. Last week, I found a photo that wasn't of me. It was sitting on my windshield like all the others, but this one showed a grave I recognized. Fresh flowers on the headstone. The name on the stone was Sarah Kern, died 3 years ago. I didn't know her, but I knew that grave because I'd seen the figure standing there 4 nights in a row. When I got home that morning, I looked up Sarah Kern online. There wasn't much. An obituary. A few Facebook posts from friends. But one detail stood out. She'd worked security at Hillcrest Cemetery. She died on shift. They found her truck parked by the north gate, engine still running. No signs of struggle. No explanation. I called in sick the next night. And the night after that, I told my supervisor I needed some time off. He said that was fine, but they'd need someone to cover my shifts. I didn't ask who. 2 days ago, I drove past the cemetery during the day. I don't know why. Maybe I wanted to see it in the sunlight, prove to myself it was just a place, just grass and stone. I parked across the street and watched the grounds for a while. Everything looked normal, quiet, empty. Then I saw my truck, parked inside near the south gate, but I wasn't working. I hadn't been back since I called in sick. I tried calling my supervisor. It went to voicemail. I tried the main office. No answer. I sat there staring at my truck, and then I saw someone walking toward it. Too far away to see clearly, but I knew the shape. The way they moved, that same still, deliberate posture. They stopped next to the truck, stood there for a moment. Then they looked in my direction. I couldn't see their face, but I knew they were looking at me. I drive past the cemetery every morning now on my way to my new job. I don't look at it directly, but I can see it from the corner of my eye. Last night, there was a car parked outside the north gate. Dark sedan, headlights off, engine running. I'm starting to find Polaroids on my car again. I drive past the cemetery every morning now on my way to my new job. I don't look at it directly, but I can see it from the corner of my eye. Last night, there was a car parked outside the north gate. Dark sedan, headlights off, engine running. This morning, I found another Polaroid on my windshield, but this one was different from all the others. It wasn't a photo of me at the cemetery. It was a photo of my apartment building, taken at night. My living room window was visible on the 3rd floor. The lights were on. I was standing at the window, looking out. I don't remember standing at the window last night. I turned the photo over. On the back, written in pen, were 2 words, "Your turn." I called the cemetery office. I asked who was working my old shift now. The woman on the phone sounded confused. She said no one was. They'd been trying to fill the position for 2 weeks, but hadn't found anyone yet. The gates have been locked at night. No security patrols. I asked her who'd been driving my truck. She said my truck was in the impound lot. It had been towed from the north gate 3 days after I stopped showing up. The keys were still in the ignition. I haven't been back to my apartment. I'm staying with a friend across town. But this morning, I found a photo tucked under the wiper blade of my car. I was parked in my friend's driveway. The photo showed me sleeping on his couch, taken from inside the living room. I don't know where else to go. My brother asked me to check on his house while he was out of town for work. He'd be gone for 2 weeks, and he just needed someone to water the plants and make sure everything looked normal. I said yes. It was only 15 minutes from my apartment, and he'd done the same for me plenty of times. The house was in a quiet neighborhood, the kind where everyone keeps to themselves. Older homes, big yards, streets that empty out after dark. I went over on a Thursday night around 11. I had a key and the alarm code. I figured I'd be in and out in 10 minutes. I watered the plants in the living room and kitchen, checked the locks on the back door. Everything seemed fine, normal. I was about to leave when I noticed the basement door was open, just a crack, maybe an inch or two. My brother always kept it closed. He was particular about things like that. I stood there looking at it for a minute, then pulled it open and turned on the light. The stairs looked normal. Concrete steps leading down to his unfinished basement. I could see his workbench at the bottom, some storage boxes, the water heater. Nothing unusual. I pulled the door shut and made sure it latched. When I came back 2 nights later, the basement door was open again. Same as before, just a crack. I checked the hinges, thinking maybe it didn't close properly, but everything seemed solid. I went downstairs this time, walked through the whole basement. Nothing was disturbed, nothing out of place. I even checked the small window well on the far wall, made sure it was locked from the inside. It was. I closed the door harder this time, listened for the latch. It clicked into place. The next visit, I brought a flashlight. The door was open again, but this time it was open wider. Maybe 6 inches. Enough that I could see the darkness of the stairwell without turning on the light. I stood in the kitchen staring at it. The house was completely silent. No furnace running. No refrigerator hum. Just silence. I walked over and looked down the stairs. My hand was on the light switch when I heard something. A soft sound, like fabric moving, like someone shifting their weight. It came from the bottom of the stairs. I turned on the light. Nothing there. Just the basement, empty and cold. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something had moved the second before the light came on. That if I'd been 1 second faster, I would have seen it. I didn't go downstairs. I pulled the door shut and locked it from the outside with a padlock my brother kept in the garage. I texted him, told him I'd locked the basement and I'd explain later. He replied an hour later asking if everything was okay. I said yes. When I came back the next night, the padlock was on the floor, still locked, but it had been removed from the door. The door was open, wider than before, wide enough that I could feel cold air coming up from the basement. I called my brother. He didn't answer. I called again and left a voicemail. Told him something was wrong with the house, that he needed to call me back. He didn't. I almost left. I should have left. But I kept thinking about how stupid I'd sound trying to explain this. A door that won't stay closed. No proof of anything, just my nerves and the dark. So I went down into the basement. The light was already on. I didn't remember leaving it on, but maybe I had. The basement looked exactly the same as before. Workbench, boxes, water heater. I walked the perimeter, checking behind the shelving units, looking for any sign that someone had been there. Nothing. Then I saw the door. It was built into the far wall. Behind behind a stack of boxes I hadn't moved before. Old wooden door, painted the same gray as the concrete. No handle, just a small metal latch. I'd been in this basement 3 times and never noticed it. I moved the boxes aside. They were lighter than they looked, mostly empty. The door was narrow, maybe 5 feet tall. I crouched down and lifted the latch. It opened inward, and cold air rushed out, colder than the basement, colder than outside. I pointed my flashlight inside. A tunnel, dirt walls, wooden support beams. It extended about 10 feet and then turned to the right. I couldn't see where it went after that. I closed the door, stacked the boxes back in front of it, went upstairs, and locked the basement door from the outside again with the padlock, then wedged a chair under the handle for good measure. I left the house and sat in my car for a while, trying to decide what to do. My brother finally called me back around 2 in the morning. I told him about the door in the basement. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said he didn't know what I was talking about. He'd been in that basement 100 times. There was no door in the wall. I went back the next morning when it was light out. I brought a friend with me. We went down into the basement together. The boxes were exactly where I'd left them. I moved them aside. There was no door, just a solid concrete wall. My friend asked if I was feeling okay. I told him I was fine. We went back upstairs, and I locked everything up. I finished watching the house for my brother. The basement door stayed closed after that. No more problems. He came home last week, and everything was normal. He thanked me and said I could borrow his truck anytime I needed it. I didn't tell him what I'd found in the tunnel before I closed the door. The footprints in the dirt, leading from the tunnel into the basement. Barefoot, child-sized. They were fresh. I finished watching the house for my brother. The basement door stayed closed after that. No more problems. He came home last week, and everything was normal. He thanked me and said I could borrow his truck anytime I needed it. I didn't tell him what I'd found in the tunnel before I closed the door that night. The footprints in the dirt. Barefoot, child-sized, leading from deeper in the tunnel toward the basement. And I didn't tell him about the other thing I saw when I pointed my flashlight further into the tunnel. The small pile of belongings stacked neatly against the wall. A blanket, some clothes, a few toys, old things covered in dust, and next to them, scratches on the wooden support beam. Tally marks, hundreds of them, like someone counting days. My brother called me yesterday. He said he'd been hearing sounds at night. Footsteps upstairs when he was in the living room. Doors opening and closing. He asked if I'd experienced anything like that when I was watching the house. I told him no. I lied. He said he was thinking about going down to the basement to check the furnace, see if maybe the house was just settling. I told him not to. I said it too quickly, too forcefully. He asked me why. I couldn't think of a good reason. Not one I could say out loud. He went down yesterday afternoon. He called me right after. He said I was right. There had been a door in the wall. He found it behind the boxes. He said it looked like someone had sealed it shut from the basement side. Recently, the concrete was still fresh. I asked him if he opened it. He said no. He said he just wanted to know if I'd seen it. I told him I had. I asked him to leave it alone. This morning, he sent me a text message. Just 4 words. I opened it anyway. He hasn't answered his phone since. I've called 8 times. I'm parked outside his house right now. All the lights are off. His car is in the driveway. The front door is unlocked. I've been sitting here for 20 minutes, trying to decide whether to go inside. The basement door is open. I can see it from the front hallway. Something just moved past the upstairs window. I started visiting my grandmother's grave every Sunday after she passed. It became a routine. I'd bring fresh flowers, sit on the bench nearby, and talk to her for a while. The cemetery was always quiet on Sunday evenings, almost empty. I liked it that way. The grave 3 plots down from hers was always well maintained. Fresh flowers every week, the grass trimmed neatly around the headstone. I noticed because most of the graves in that section looked neglected. This one stood out. The name on the stone was Michael Carpenter, died 1987. No other details, just the name and years. I never saw who maintained it until about a month ago. I was leaving just after sunset when I saw a woman kneeling at Michael's grave. She was arranging flowers in the metal vase, taking her time with each stem. I didn't want to disturb her, so I walked quietly toward my car. But as I passed, she turned and looked at me. She smiled, a normal, polite smile. I nodded and kept walking. The next Sunday, she was there again. Same time, same grave. This time she spoke to me as I was leaving. She asked if I visited often. I said yes, every Sunday. She said she did too. We talked for a few minutes. Her name was Laura. She said Michael was her husband. She'd been coming here for 37 years. She seemed lonely, so I told her it was nice that she kept his grave so well. She thanked me and said it was the least she could do. After that, I started seeing her every week. We'd talk for a few minutes, sometimes longer. She told me about Michael, how they'd met, what he was like. She never mentioned how he died, and I never asked. She seemed grateful to have someone to talk to. 3 weeks ago, she asked if I'd ever visited the cemetery at night. The question caught me off guard. I said no, that I usually left before dark. She nodded slowly, then said I should try it sometime. That it was peaceful, different. She said she came at night sometimes when she couldn't sleep. I told her that sounded nice, but I didn't commit to anything. The following Sunday, she wasn't there. I waited for a while, thinking maybe she was running late, but she never showed up. I felt strangely disappointed. I'd gotten used to our conversations. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about what she'd said, about visiting at night. Around midnight, I got dressed and drove to the cemetery. I told myself I just wanted to see what it was like. That's all. The gates were closed, but not locked. I pushed one open and walked inside. The cemetery looked different at night. The streetlights didn't reach past the front section, and the paths disappeared into darkness. I used my phone's flashlight to find my way to my grandmother's grave. Laura was there, standing at Michael's grave, her back to me. I almost called out to her, but something stopped me. She was completely motionless, her head bowed like she was praying. I didn't want to interrupt. I stayed quiet and knelt at my grandmother's grave. I could see Laura in my peripheral vision, still standing in the same position. Minutes passed. She didn't move, didn't make a sound. I started to feel uncomfortable. The silence was too heavy, too complete. I stood up to leave, and that's when I noticed something. Laura wasn't wearing the same clothes she usually wore. She was in a white dress, simple, old-fashioned, and she was barefoot. I took a step toward the path, and she turned her head. Just her head. Her body stayed facing the grave. She asked where I was going. Her voice was different, flat. I told her I was heading home, that it was late. She said I should stay, that Michael wanted to meet me. I didn't respond. I started walking toward the gate, trying to keep my pace normal. Behind me, I heard footsteps, not walking, running, fast, bare feet on grass. I ran. I made it to my car and locked the doors. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely get the key in the ignition. I looked back at the cemetery entrance. Laura was standing just inside the gate, perfectly still again, watching me. I drove away without looking back. I didn't go to the cemetery the next Sunday, or the one after that. I told myself I'd go back eventually, when I felt ready. But yesterday, I received a letter in the mail. No return address. Just my name and address written in careful handwriting. Inside was a single page, handwritten. You didn't stay long enough. Michael was disappointed. He's been waiting for someone new to talk to. It gets lonely here. We'll see you soon. It was signed Laura. I looked up Michael Carpenter today. Found his obituary from 1987. It listed his surviving family members. His wife's name was Laura Carpenter. I kept reading. Laura died 6 months after Michael. Car accident. They're buried next to each other. I drove past the cemetery this evening. I didn't stop. I didn't even slow down. But as I passed the gates, I saw someone standing just inside. A woman in a white dress. She waved. My phone rang an hour ago. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. When I played it back, there was just silence at first, then breathing, then a voice. Laura's voice. You forgot your flowers. I checked my car. The flowers I'd bought for my grandmother 3 weeks ago, the ones I never delivered, were gone from my back seat. There's someone standing across the street from my apartment. I can see them from my window. They're not moving, just standing under the streetlight. I can't see their face clearly, but I can see what they're wearing. A white dress. My phone is ringing again. My phone kept ringing all night. Same unknown number. I stopped answering after the third call. I stopped listening to the voicemails after the fifth. They were all the same. Silence, then breathing, then Laura's voice asking when I was coming back. The woman in the white dress stood across the street until morning. When the sun came up, she was gone. I looked up the cemetery records today. I needed to know for sure. Laura Carpenter died in 1987, 6 months after Michael. But that wasn't the part that made me pull over on the side of the road. Laura's grave wasn't next to Michael's. She was buried on the other side of the cemetery, 4 sections away. The grave next to Michael's, the one I'd seen her kneeling at every Sunday, belonged to someone else. A woman named Patricia Hodge. Died 2019. I drove to the cemetery this afternoon. Daylight. Other people around. I told myself I just needed to see it one more time to be sure. Michael's grave was exactly where I remembered it. Fresh flowers in the vase, just like always. I walked to the next plot over. Patricia Hodge. The dates matched the records. Then I walked 4 sections over to where Laura was actually buried. Her grave was overgrown, weeds covering the stone. No flowers. It looked like no one had visited in years. I knelt down and cleared away some of the grass so I could read the headstone. Beneath her name and dates, there was an inscription: beloved wife and mother, forever waiting. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. No words, just a photo. It was me, kneeling at Laura's grave, taken from behind, taken just seconds ago. I spun around. The cemetery was empty. No one within 100 feet of me. My phone buzzed again. Another photo. Me standing now, looking around, taken from a different angle. Then another. Me walking quickly toward my car. Another. Me reaching for my door handle. I got in my car and locked the doors. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Photo after photo. Me driving out of the cemetery. Me at the stoplight. Me turning onto my street. I'm home now. Doors locked. Curtains closed. My phone finally stopped buzzing an hour ago. I just looked out my window. There are flowers on my doorstep. Fresh ones. The same kind I used to bring to my grandmother's grave. There's a card attached. I opened the door just enough to reach them. My hands were shaking. The card says, "Thank you for visiting. Michael and I enjoyed our talks. Patricia says hello. She's very excited to have a new friend. See you Sunday." It's signed by all 3 of them. Sunday is tomorrow. I don't know what happens if I don't go.